So the second to last episode of the South Park season came out about a week and a half ago now, and considering how consistently I've been uploading, it was inevitable that I would be incredibly late at some point, so here we are. But shockingly, this time I actually do have a good excuse, because I got married. That's right, I'm a married man. Sorry ladies, I know you've all been hoping you'd have your chance at the guy who summarizes South Park episodes on the internet, but I'm officially off limits. But that's enough of all this getting married crap. Let's talk about something that actually matters. Like South Park. This was a Thanksgiving themed episode, and what was interesting about this one is that it felt like they reeled it back into a more classic South Park story. This surprised me because the whole season has been building up to the Trump and Satan plotline, with Trump being heavily featured in every episode so far, but this episode had barely any Trump at all. In fact, he only appears in one single scene throughout the entire episode. Instead, the episode focuses mostly on the town, as the annual turkey trot race has a grand prize of $5,000 for the winner, and everyone starts to plan how they're gonna win. They also comment on Saudi Arabia, specifically the comedians who decided to attend the Riyadh Comedy Festival paid for by the Saudi royal family. And of course, it wouldn't be a new episode without going after someone in the current administration, and this time they really tear into Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. So enough of the intro, let's just get into it. This video is sponsored by Raycon. We're getting closer to the holiday season, and if you're still looking for a gift, I highly recommend Raycon's Essential Open Earbuds. You see, regular earbuds tend to block everything out. It's really hard to hear if someone's calling your name or if there's a car honking or anything like that, but these Raycon ones sit just outside of your ear canal, so you get really clear sound, but you can actually hear what's going on around you. They're super lightweight, and they have a flexible ear hook that adapts to any ear so that they actually stay in, unlike many other wireless earbuds. They can also connect to multiple devices at once, and you can seamlessly switch between the devices without having to repair them every time. I've been using them for a while now, and I really like them when I go on a walk or when I'm editing a video or really any time of the day. The Essential Open Earbuds are here for the holiday season, and they're selling fast. Raycon audio products are up to 20% off this holiday season. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/bloomsopen to save on Raycon audio products site-wide. If you order by December 15th, you guarantee delivery before Christmas, because great gifts shouldn't show up late. So again, just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/bloomsopen to get up to 20% off during this holiday season, and thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. The episode opens with a city council meeting discussing the plan for the annual turkey trot. They're trying to find a sponsor, but with the economy in its current state, they're having a lot of trouble. We also get to see Mr. Mackey in his new job as a custodian, which was a funny way to show what he's been up to since quitting from his position at ICE earlier in the season. The group does end up coming up with a sponsor who might be willing to help, and we find out who exactly that is in a commercial.
South Park Turkey Trot, sponsored by Saudi Arabia.
This was definitely one of my favorite parts of the episode. One of my favorite things they used to do in old South Park is when they would make fake commercials for stuff. It's something they don't really do that often anymore, and the fact that they did it in this case was perfect. It really reminded me of old school South Park a lot, especially with the song in the background playing Arabic gibberish the whole time. It really took me back to the golden age.
Disparaging remarks towards the Saudi royal family are strictly prohibited.
And of course, the irony of an event centered around Thanksgiving, a strictly American holiday, being sponsored by Saudi Arabia was just the cherry on top. Now, if you somehow don't know, as I mentioned, this is in reference to the fact that Saudi Arabia has really been pushing to expand their entertainment industry, investing heavily into everything from the UFC to golf to Formula One, esports, theme parks, pretty much any aspect of entertainment you can imagine. One of their most recent endeavors was into the comedy scene, hosting the Riyadh Comedy Festival with some of the biggest names in the industry attending. It eventually came out that the comedians had a very strict list of topics that they had to agree not to mention in their sets, including the country itself, its legal system, and anything about the Saudi royal family or their religion. Now, if you know anything about Matt and Trey, you know how they feel about censorship, so it's not really surprising that they decided to fire some shots at the comedians willing to take this deal. Not to mention Saudi Arabia's history of maybe some not so ethical practices, like murdering journalists who are critical of the government and their use of slave labor, but they do have an infinite amount of money to do whatever they want, so of course when these comedians saw the numbers, most of them were more than happy to overlook all that stuff. The irony, of course, being that a lot of these comedians claim to stand against much of what they were directly supporting by signing these contracts. Dave Chappelle was one of my favorite comedians for a long time, and in recent years he's complained a lot about how you can't do comedy anymore because everything is woke and you might get canceled for it. So for him to sign a deal where they are literally telling him he can't say certain things and then go on stage and complain about free speech in America, some might say that's a tad hypocritical. And don't get me started on Bill Burr, who I've also been a big fan of for a long time. For the past few years, he's been talking non-stop about billionaires and preaching against the 1% even tearing into celebrities who have taken blood money because they're greedy.
Beyonce and Mariah Carey actually did private New Year's gigs for $1 million. Did New Year's gigs for Gaddafi's kids. How much fucking money do you need to make? You know, you're gonna go dance like a goddamn fucking clown for a mass murderer's kids, and then you take that fucking blood money.
But of course, when the price was right, he was more than willing to take the blood money for the exact reasons he's been preaching against nonstop. And then there's Pete Davidson, whose dad died in 9/11. And I'm not going to explain that one because it's a bit controversial, but you can do your own research into it. Now, if these comedians just came out and were honest about it, saying, listen, the money was just too good, I'm willing to look past all of that because they're paying me millions of dollars, that would be far more respectable than anything they're doing now. Like Bill Burr trying to defend it, saying he's actually just trying to help them progress and that maybe one day they will actually allow free speech. No, dude, they offered you more money than you've ever been offered for a single show and you took the money. Just admit that. That's why Tim Dillon's response was my favorite, because he was 100% honest, and that's so much more respectable.
They're paying me enough money to look the other way. Do you understand?
No, of course I am. Everyone should be doing it. Everyone should be getting every dollar they can. This has been my consistent position for my entire life. I don't care if they execute half the comics in front of me.
Now, maybe he should have waited till after the check cleared to share his honesty, considering it got him fired from the show, and ironically, his firing just proved how strict they actually are about their censorship. But regardless, he's just saying what all of these comedians are actually thinking. Anyways, this was a video about South Park at some point, so let's get back to that. When the boys hear about the grand prize, they are more than willing to take the money.
If anybody's gonna get money from Saudi Arabia, it should be us.
Cartman proves to be the mastermind behind their team, as he claims to know exactly what they need to do to win.
I know a way to give our team an optimal winning advantage. Token. Hey, man.
That's another thing I really liked about this episode. This is just classic Cartman being Cartman, and it works super well. Cartman continuously guilt trips Token until eventually he agrees to join the team. Meanwhile, the cops keep getting calls from the president demanding that they release Peter Thiel, who they still have in custody, but when they refuse, the president sends in Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Pete Hegseth, the Department of War. We're here to infiltrate this police station and extract the POI.
Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know a lot about this dude or what this is specifically referencing. I know he was the one in charge of striking those Venezuelan boats that supposedly had drug smugglers on them, and I think we're like going to war with Venezuela now or something. I don't know, dude. I've been trying to like actually go outside a bit more often nowadays, so haven't been keeping up. But looking through his Twitter pages, I did understand why they portrayed him like this. I mean, this dude makes a lot of videos for social media talking about what the Department of War is doing. In the episode, he's shown to be this pretty pathetic dude just role-playing as some kind of war general, and like I said, I don't know that much about him, but he was a funny character regardless. So everyone in town goes about registering for the turkey trot, and Cartman is pretty confident in their team with Token on their side until he sees the girls' team.
Hey guys, what's up?
We then get a look at some of the content from Pete Hegseth, where he talks about how badass they are and how they're going to do what needs to be done. However, his content is interrupted when the president calls him to remind him of what he actually needs to do.
Don't just make a bunch of content. Like, actually go and do something.
Be sure to like and subscribe, guys. Yes, sir, Mr. President. I will make this town pay.
The morning of the race, Cartman finds out that Token bailed on the team because it's sponsored by Saudi Arabia and he just can't support them politically. He tries to convince Token to race through his classic Cartman manipulation tactics, and he had some pretty funny lines that felt a lot like they were making fun of the excuses that some of those comedians tried to give.
They're trying to be progressive, okay? If Saudi Arabia is out paying for sporting events, they're not out hacking up reporters and inviting Pete Davidson to come do comedy.
Token is busy playing Arc Raiders, so he just completely ignores Cartman. So Cartman goes for the last resort and decides to steal his Xbox 360. I'm sorry, but how is Token playing Arc Raiders on an Xbox 360? I'm pretty sure that game isn't even on last-gen consoles, let alone 2 generations ago. Trey Parker is a pretty avid gamer too. There's no way he doesn't realize that the 360 hasn't been supported in years. I don't know how this made it through. So anyways, the turkey trot starts, and Pete Hegseth watches on in horror, believing that they're being fired upon, and of course, not actually doing anything besides making content.
There's an uprising here, some kind of insurrection. Be sure to like and subscribe.
This bit reminded me a lot of Randy back in season 12 in Pandemic 1 and 2, when he's doing the Cloverfield parody and over-dramatizing everything. Just figured I'd mention that. But he shares his plan of action with his troops, which once again doesn't involve actually doing much of anything.
3rd Battalion, you'll be posting up here. I want you posting on Instagram and Twitter.
However, he is interrupted when Kristi Noem and Ice show up, hearing that there's a civilian uprising, and they're not going to miss their chance for content. Kristi decides to take the civilian uprising head on, making sure to take out the most dangerous ones first, just doing what she does best. Meanwhile, Pete just ends up firing a bunch of tear gas into the crowd, which causes the race to get all broken up, but the people are desperate to get that prize money, and the only thing that matters to them is whether Saudi Arabia will be okay with their new route. Pete ends up getting his own montage, creating content and attacking civilians, set to a parody of Danger Zone that's not exactly subtle. And while all of this is going on, Cartman ends up leading Token directly into the turkey trot as he tries to get his Xbox back. When Token eventually catches up to him, he takes his Xbox and leaves, accidentally walking directly over the finish line and winning the race.
Yes! Race science! Race science!
The episode ends with the cops tossing Pete Hegseth into a cell alongside Peter Thiel, who reminds us that this isn't over yet.
South Park's gonna pay for this. They're all gonna pay.
And that is where the episode ends. So now let's get into my thoughts on it as a whole. You know, when I first watched this episode, I thought it was just okay, nothing really special, but rewatching it while making this, I gotta say, this episode actually grew on me a lot. The fact that there was essentially no Trump in this episode was a huge refresher. It really just felt like a breath of fresh air overall. As I have said many times at this point, I don't outright hate the Trump stuff, I just think they leaned way too heavily into it early on in the season and got caught in the trap of, let's just talk about whatever Trump did this week. Now, of course, that didn't stop them from making fun of the administration, as they really clowned on Pete Hegseth here. And like I said, I don't want to speak to the accuracy of the parody or anything because I really don't know much about the guy, but I will say that I really enjoyed his character in the episode. That archetype of guy who thinks he's a badass but is really just kind of pathetic and doesn't do anything is actually one that South Park has done several times in the past, and I think it worked really well here. I really liked how no matter what was happening, he had to make sure he was making content out of it in some way, and the fact that they brought Kristi Noem and Ice back to get content as well was a pretty funny way to show how this seems to be a common theme through all the branches of this administration. For whatever reason, our government has been obsessed with creating social media content. You can say that they're just trying to be transparent or they're creating propaganda or whatever you believe, but one thing is for sure, they want everything to be a spectacle, and whatever the reason for it is, I think this episode did a great job in parodying this content-first model they're sticking to. And of course, by now, you know how I feel about the Saudi Arabia thing. I thought it was the highlight of the episode, and when it comes to this season, any social commentary that's not just about the current politics is a refresher. And this one really felt like it was perfectly designed for South Park to make fun of. Censorship, hypocrisy, money over morals, these are like the three big things that South Park satirizes more than anything else. Like, if this was mainstream news 20 years ago, they would have 100% made an episode about it without question. And while the execution maybe left a little bit to be desired in terms of what they actually had to say about it, I still thought it was one of the best plot lines of the season. Another thing I really liked about this episode is that it seems like there was an active attempt to make it more focused on the boys. Granted, it ends up focusing a lot more on Cartman and Token than the whole group, but to me it feels like a step in the right direction. As I said, we got a pretty vintage Cartman here. He played his role perfectly, and his racism and manipulation was just classic Cartman being Cartman. Not to mention the fact that Cartman and Token is actually a very underrated duo. Cartman antagonizing Token has given us some pretty hilarious moments throughout the show, and it was executed super well here. Now, my only criticism of this episode is that once again, it didn't really move the underlying plot forward at all, and normally I would never complain about that, but for this season in particular, with such a serialized plotline, it makes me wonder where they're going with this. Like, the story really hasn't moved forward at all in a few episodes now. Did they realize that the story was not nearly as complex as they thought it would be and have just been giving us filler episodes until the grand finale? Or is all of this somehow still setting up for the finale? We'll find out soon enough, since it's supposed to air next Wednesday. And let me just say, I'm pretty glad we're coming to the end of the season. And not because I don't want more South Park, but the prospect of moving past this Trump plot is what I'm most looking forward to. And if I'm being honest, to be a little bit vulnerable with you guys, I really don't think I'm good at making these episode reviews. I try to make them more entertaining by attempting to do bits or add my own humor, but to me, it always feels like I'm just summarizing the episode and saying, "Huh, I thought that was funny," and that's it. I really can't help but feel like I'm just pushing out a bunch of slop that I'm not super passionate about, and I kinda hate that. In my personal opinion, my videos have always been at their best when I have an idea for a video, a thesis that I can build off of. My whole passion, the reason I started YouTube in the first place, is because I love explaining to people why the things that I find cool or interesting are cool or interesting. I'm not a reviewer. I'm not good at being analytical. I don't know much about the art of storytelling, and I don't really know how to critique it either. Other channels like Johnny Two Cellos or Slush are way better than me when it comes to that kind of stuff. And with episode reviews, especially for this season, I've always felt like I'm trying to come up with something to say. I just don't really enjoy it, and I feel like the video quality suffers because of that. And with that being said, I will still make a review of the finale, but I can't promise anything about the future episodes of the show. What I mean by that is making individual videos for each episode. Obviously, I'll still talk about the episodes. It'll probably just be in a different format, like one big video at the end of the season or something like that. Now, that doesn't mean I'm sick of South Park in any way. I actually have several ideas for South Park videos in the works. I'm just sick of making these type of South Park videos, these reviews where I feel like I have nothing to say. I don't know. I just wanted to rant a little bit. Sorry if you don't care, just figured the best thing is to be honest with you guys about how I'm feeling. So that's it for this video. I will see you guys for the grand finale next week.